All right, here we go. Welcome, Garrett. Charles.
Yes, sir.
That's your name, right?
Yep.
But your real last name is something different. But you don't have to say it on here. It's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
So how you doing?
Doing great.
So we talked about doing this podcast for a minute. You live in Texas.
Right.
And work for Treat Mental Health in Texas, and I get the opportunity to work for you.
Yep.
And it's been a lot of fun, but you've told me a little bit about your story, but I'm really kind of excited to dive into it, and then I want to get your opinions on some things out of your story.
For sure.
Right? But you got quite the heck of a journey, man, and you've overcome a lot, right?
Yep.
All right. So tell me about it. You grew up in
San Antonio, Texas. Yeah, both my parents were in the military, and public school kid, just kind of going through it.
Are your parents Texans?
So my dad he's from Houston, Texas, and then my mom is from the south side of Detroit.
Okay, and they met in the military?
I think they met in college.
Okay.
Yep. University of Houston.
Okay. And then grew up in San Antonio. What kind of household? What was that like?
Just your typical, I think, like American family, Parents are still together to this day, so didn't have a divorced household. Grew up in the church and, going to school and getting straight A's and all that kind of stuff. Very involved in sports, football, baseball, soccer, basketball, you name it, I did it, gymnastics. I was very blessed financially as a kid. Both my parents were, successful in that regard. So I had, a good upbringing. It was a lot better than most. I was very blessed.
So what'd your parents do?
Dad was a pharmaceutical sales rep for a while, and then he got into life insurance, and he's a State Farm agent now. And then my mom is a family law attorney. Okay. And then they were both in the Army.
Got it. So pretty successful, driven parents.
Yep.
Normal household. Grew up pretty normal kid. Did you get in trouble as a little kid a lot or no?
Not a whole lot as a little kid. I didn't really start getting in trouble until I was about 12 or 13.
Okay, so 12 or 13, that is, 5th, 6th grade?
7th grade for me.
7th grade.
Yep.
All right, so what happened in 7th grade that kind of maybe was the event that kind of kicked you off, started?
I think the death of my dad's dad, my grandfather, I think that was the first time I had really contemplated life and the purpose of all of this. Losing somebody that was that close to me was just kind of a life-changing event, and I didn't really understand it at the time, but it developed this infatuation with death, trying to figure out what's on the other side and what is God or who is God, and all that kind of, all the spiritual things.
So you grew up in church,
right?
Your grandpa died, and so it wasn't just normally okay, he went to heaven to be with Jesus. What was that about? You just didn't believe it, or?
Yeah, I had my doubts, and not being able to see things with my own eyes was hard for me. I'm the kind of got to see it to believe it guy. So I think even at an early age, that's how I was. And they talked about a lot of things in the hopefully and the maybe, and it was never a for certain thing for me. And so that just left me in a place of skepticism.
Okay, and so then you're contemplating your grandpa dying, and then what did that kind of lead to?
I think I started to explore, the wrong crowds as far as friends and trying to find my sense of purpose and belonging in the world. Got involved in some pretty weird circumstances in middle school. One of my friend's older brothers was involved in gangs, and so being able to see drugs and alcohol and girls and jewelry and all that kind of stuff that he had, I began to idolize that. And so as my friends who were my age started to kind of fall off and go their own way and get involved in drugs and stuff, because of this thing that I idolized, I started to do it as well because I wanted what they had.
Okay, so 12 years old, grandpa dies. When's the first time you were exposed to being around anything like that? Tell me that story.
The first time I was ever exposed to drugs, I think I was 9, and it was that same friend's older brothers. We found a bag full of ecstasy pills in the back of his truck, and we thought they were candy, and we were digging in the bag to get some out, and then his dad saw it and took that from us. And And so, and then he had to kind of explain what things were, kind of what drugs are. And then fast forward to like 12 or 13, we started smoking cigarettes, and that was the first time I smoked pot. I thought we were smoking a cigarette, but it was a joint. And so it tasted different. It didn't hurt my throat as bad, and smoked a lot of it and got stupid high and was laughing, all that kind of stuff. And it was just a fun night. And that's, I fell in love with it after that. It made me feel confident and strong and capable.
Okay. So first time you smoke weed, you're like, oh, this is it, right? And
Right.
then what happened after that? Like you're what, 12 at that point?
13.
13?
Yep,
7th,
eighth
8th
grade.
grade? 8th grade, you smoke weed. Did you drink before then?
Not really. I mean, I had sips and a beer and stuff like that, but that night we smoked that joint, and then I drank like a 24-ounce Smirnoff Ice. So, I mean, I was feeling really good.
Yeah. Okay.
And then that just kept on going, and that was like the thing we did on the weekends. That was the thing we did after school sometimes when we didn't have homework. And it started out as just a fun thing to do, but I quickly realized that it was more than that for me. I think that was the only thing I thought about. I became obsessed very quickly, as I do with a lot of other things as well. That was the only thing that I looked forward to at the end of the day when school was over.
Okay. So you're smoking weed, 8th grade. You still playing sports?
Still playing sports, baseball. I was in competitive baseball, select leagues. And then I started showing up to practice in the games high. So that was, my batting average tanked and everything like that. And
In 8th grade, you're
Ninth grade now.
Ninth grade,
Yeah.
freshman year, high school.
freshman year, yep.
You start showing up stoned.
Yep.
Okay.
And kind of everybody started to know that was what I did in school at least. And, ninth grade, being around a lot of the older kids, the juniors and the seniors, that was a big thing for me. Just wanting to be friends with them, thinking that they were cool. And so, I started selling weed that summer of 8th to 9th grade summer. And one of my friends was like 3 years older than me, and he kind of taught me how to do it. And so when I actually got into school, knowing that was kind of what they did, I just went balls to the walls with it. And I'd steal money from my parents and buy large amounts of weed and, try to be a drug dealer.
Yeah. So you're selling weed. You're a freshman selling weed to juniors and seniors. Probably made you pretty popular.
Yep.
Right. And then where did it go from there? Like, what was
So-
that progression?
Yeah, so about 2 months into my 9th grade year, I got caught on the bus smoking a dab pen, and so they ran the cameras and all of that, and they sent me to alternative schools, suspended me, and that was when I got exposed to some even harder drugs, hydrocodone and different pills and whatnot, and so.
So let me back up. Let me stop you right there because I want to get to that part. You get caught with a dab pen. Did your parents at any time like suspected or known or anything before that, or was this like the first time they're like, "Oh, our son's smoking pot"?
So 2 days before that, I was caught with like 36 1-gram bags full of weed and a wad of cash
By your parents?
by my mom.
Okay.
Yeah, and like before that point, she knew I smoked, but she didn't really care. She kind of just, informed me like, hey, you probably shouldn't be doing this as a kid. You need to wait till you're an adult. It's not the end of the world, but you need to focus on school and sports. But then when she caught me with a lot and then the money to go with it, she knew that I was selling it, and that's when she kind of came down. And then it was either that next day or 2 days later is when I got caught at school.
You got caught.
Yeah, and so then that's when, before that, she had never told my dad, and then when I got caught at school, she finally told my dad.
And what was that like coming home?
Horrible.
What did they do? Like, what happened?
Grounded me, took away my phone, took away everything, all my privileges, and made me focus on school, and that was it.
At that point, did you think, oh, I better stop and get it together? I mean, what was your mindset like?
No, I think I just realized that I needed to do a better job at getting away with it, hiding it better, and figuring out ways to slide under the radar.
Got it. So you go to continuation school
Yep.
with a bunch of other kids that are kind of like-minded.
Right.
And what was that like?
It was
So had you been in trouble before, or that just one incident and they sent you to
That was one incident. Yeah, they had a zero tolerance policy for possession at the school. And yeah, I mean, I was exposed to things that I didn't really knew existed in my world. The harder drugs, the gang life, people who were affiliated that were, still my age. And then, learning about people's parents that also did drugs and would do drugs with their kids. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of opened my mind that my life is, different. I was much better off than most of these kids, but yet I still desired what these kids had because I saw their parents doing drugs with them as like a freedom, as like something that, why can't my parents smoke with me or
like these
or
dudes
whatever.
are lucky.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And so like when did you start doing harder drugs right away or?
Yeah, so I took my mom's hydrocodone out of the medicine cabinet, started using those and selling those, and then Xanax and some other pills. And then Thanksgiving Day of 2013, I took a bunch of Ambien, hydrocodone, somas, promethazine, just a whole handful of pills, and overdosed on Thanksgiving Day. Ended up in the hospital for a couple of days.
So do you feel like you did that on purpose where you're trying to kill yourself or
Nah,
you just were trying to get really high?
I was trying to get really high.
Okay, so you just majorly overdid it.
Yeah, majorly overdid it.
So it's Thanksgiving Day, you got all these pills, you take them.
Yep.
Overdosed.
Yep. And ended up in the hospital for, I think, 3 days.
Do you remember going out or do you like?
Yeah, a lot of it's a blur. I know that I was freaking out and like, I think I was hallucinating and seeing these different things like attack my family. And so I was crying and screaming. And my parents, like, before I started to kind of fade out, they locked me in a bedroom and were trying to like hold me back. So, but I don't really remember all of that.
And they called 911.
Right.
And then.
Well, they actually didn't. I don't think they called an ambulance. I think they just took me to the hospital.
They took you to the hospital. What happened at the hospital?
I don't really remember. All I know is that like the next memory I have is just waking up and feeling like I was in trouble, and the nurses and my dad just looking disappointed, and then started to talk about treatment and going to a higher level of care, going to a psych hospital, and then and that's what happened. And the ambulance transferred me from the actual ER to a psych hospital.
What psych hospital? Georgetown?
It's called the Knicks in San Antonio.
Is it still there?
Not there anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, that one got shut down. It was a pretty rough place. So did 6 days in the Knicks hospital, and then they transferred me up to Euless, Texas, which is up near Dallas, at the Right Step. And then I did 38 days in treatment at 14 years old.
And the Right Step is an adolescent treatment center close to Dallas. Okay, it's okay.
Yeah, they do only do adults now, but it's still there.
So you did 30 days of treatment at the Right Step near Dallas.
Right.
And did you learn anything? Did your eyes get open? Do you remember thinking, oh, there's maybe something to sobriety? Or
No, it was the opposite. I started to learn about meth and heroin and all these other harder drugs. And, I personally think that going to treatment that young, for me, not for everybody, but just for me specifically in my case, going to treatment that young, did cause more harm than good. It exposed me to other drugs and other ways of life that, it basically went to like drug college and learned how to be an addict. I learned how to hide it better. Yeah. And then it just sparked my curiosity to want to try all these other things.
What do you think the alternative would have been?
I think the alternative would have probably been to focus more on my mental health and not the drug and alcohol addiction, because at that point I really wasn't addicted to anything. I was just doing it every now and then to have fun. And so if I think if I were to have been educated more and focused more on like therapy and my friend groups and my sense of belonging, that would have done a lot better.
Got it. Okay, so you go there and then you get out and you go right back to San Antonio.
Yep. And
sports is over at this point?
Nope, still playing baseball. Okay. That was in the like November to January time frame, so that was the off season, and then started up spring ball that following March. And then I was also in an outpatient program.
Did you get to go back to your high school, or did you have to go to a different high school?
For 2 days, I had to go to this like mental health type private school that my parents tried to put me in. And 2 days in, I was like, I'm not doing this. I'll never go if y'all are going to make me go to this school, because I just didn't feel like I fit in.
Right.
And so, the alternative was I either go to that school or I don't go to school at all. And so my parents were finally like, all right, we'll just put you back in public school.
And did you go to the same high school you got kicked out of?
Yep.
And they let you back because it had been some time, or?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So you go back to that school, all your friends are there. And then what?
Everybody had these stories about, what had happened and where I was at. And, a lot of people thought that I died, and it was just kind of this weird thing. And like, I got a lot of attention for it. And it was like, it opened my eyes to the fact that, my craziness and all of the chaos in my life put all the eyes on me. And I liked that. I fed off of it. And then I also learned that, if I could tell these crazy stories, whether they were true or not, then I could have people, one, give me the attention, but also have like a sense of respect for me. And so a lot of the stories that I heard in rehab that first time, I then took to my school and told those stories as if they were my own.
Yeah.
And that led to, me having to live up to that. And so, being around a bunch of 16, 17-year-old gangbangers, and me as this 14-year-old, little rich white boy, I had to change who I was, and I had to change the way I did things and the way I talked and the way I walked, and I did. And I think that was probably like the tipping point of where my life just started to go downhill really quick, because everybody believed it. And I took great pride in that. All of these stories about me doing things and killing people and just a bunch of bullshit, really.
Yeah.
But it made me feel good. And so I lived that life. And then, like I said, it just went downhill from there.
It's funny, like creating an image of somebody that you're not,
Right.
in order to be liked, is kind of in a way what we all do to
Yep.
some extent.
Yep.
And we have our part of us that we show to other people, and then we have our part that's really going on. But like when you did that to an extreme,
Right.
at that age. And so, okay, so you're hanging out with these guys. Then what happened?
So I started selling weed again that following summer. I had this really purple weed that everybody was talking about, and so I was sober up until that point. So like from the time I got out of rehab until that summer, I stayed sober. But then I was still selling it. And
so you must have like wanted something because you didn't use, right? So something must have sunk in there. Or were you getting drug tested and you're scared you're going to get in trouble?
That's what it was. My dad bought like 100 pack of UAs and was drug testing me weekly. And then I was in this outpatient program as well, and they were also UAing me. And then, I guess there was a little bit, a lot of the friends that I had in the outpatient program genuinely wanted to be sober because they were coming off of harder drugs. And so I think I kind of just went with the grain on that of being sober. But eventually, started selling it again, and made some more relationships with older guys who would plug me in with their drug dealers. And ultimately, I ended up using again and again. And then I started trying psychedelics, acid, and mushrooms. And that is I think the point spiritually where my life changed, because I realized that, there definitely is something on the other side of this. There's a world that we can't see. And that sparked my interest into wanting to explore that via psychedelic drugs.
Okay.
And then after that, now that I'm doing acid and mushrooms and Xanax, it was just like, all right, well, what else can I try? And so, getting high at school every day, going on the way to school, at school, on the way home, grades started dropping. I failed a couple of classes, and then
What grade is this?
10th grade
Okay.
now, beginning, middle of 10th grade. Not a whole lot happened. I was sent to alternative school a total of 3 times in my high school years. One for fighting, one for the dab pen, and then one for possession of my Adderall or Vyvanse. And throughout that 10th grade year, it was kind of just a blur. It's all the same. Nothing really big happened, except for the introduction to psychedelics. And then when I turned 16, that's when things really started to get bad because my parents wanted to send me off to these different programs and, boys' homes and military school and all these different things that they were trying to come up with to combat my behaviors and the addiction. And so I just went even further when they started to do that. Started doing cocaine.
Did they send you somewhere, or they were just talking about it?
They tried. Yeah, they were talking about it. They were trying. It was really more my dad, and then my mom was kind of playing the devil's advocate, saying that it was more harm than good, or this or that. And so I was able to manipulate my way out of it most of the time. Still was involved in the outpatient program and counseling and all that kind of stuff. But then ultimately, I got kicked out of that outpatient program. I kept bringing weed and smoking with the other clients, and so they said I couldn't go to that anymore. And that's when my parents kind of just threw their hands up and threw in the towel and was like, "You're just gonna do what you're gonna do." They kind of gave up in a way.
You're still living with them?
Still living with them.
Okay.
A lot of violence, though. I probably put over 100 holes in my parents' walls.
A lot of anger.
A lot of frustration, just trying to, one, figure out my life, but also heal the broken kid that was inside of me. And that entire time, I was convinced that I was an adult and that I deserved freedom and responsibility of an adult. And that's kind of why my dad gave up, because I was not going to act like a kid. I was not obedient. And so he was like, "All right, you want to be an adult, then I'm going to treat you like an adult." And even made me pay rent and do different things.
And you got siblings?
I have one younger brother. He's 8 years younger than me.
Okay, so he's way younger than you.
Yep.
Okay.
And I traumatized him a lot going through all this. A lot of the violence. I think my brother probably has some PTSD associated with all of my outbursts. So, and then junior year, halfway through my junior year, I was dropping out of school, basically. Stopped showing up, kept getting in trouble. Grades were failing, and so the counselor offered a online at-risk dropout program. And so I was able to finish the second half of my junior year and my senior year online in like 2 months.
Okay.
And so finally graduated high school, and that was where like the slope got the steepest. Went really balls to the walls at that point and started selling everything, cocaine, weed, pills, and it just led from one thing to another. I mean, at this point, I'm moving, pounds and pounds of weed, not just a little bit here and there, and started getting involved with some organized crime groups as well. I had a friend whose dad was a mafia boss, so working with them and selling drugs for them. I wasn't, in the mafia. I wasn't a gang member or anything, but that was who I ran with, who I associated myself with. And then, when I was 17 now, I just turned 17, about 4 or 5 months after I graduated high school, I robbed some guy. That was a whole incident. Had a lot of drugs and a lot of guns on me. And on the way out from that robbery, we were going really fast, like 120 and a 60, and got pulled over with everything on us. That was the first time I had gotten arrested for felony charges. A couple of times before that, it was terroristic threat and criminal mischief and different things like that, but nothing serious. But then, so got pulled over with all the guns and the drugs. I got put on 6 years of probation. Went to rehab once in that November, and then got out, moved into sober living, lasted in sober living about 6 weeks, still using, still smoking. And then I had to take a UA for probation. And so that was what I was worried about. And I kind of just was like, all right, I'm just going to fail the drug test. And so still in the sober living house, I went to a meeting high on acid. I started having a bad trip in the middle of the meeting. And so I think there was a couple of guys who were from a different sober living house of the same network that called me out and was like, "Yo, we know you're high. You're going to have to get kicked out." So got kicked out of the sober living, and then was homeless for about a week. Was bouncing around from all my friends' houses, and then
So you're couch surfing?
couch surfing. Yeah. Parents wouldn't let me back in. Couldn't find another sober living, and so I think I slept on the street one of those nights, and then the rest were with friends. And then at the end of it, like, I think I was a week away from having to take that drug test for probation. And so I called my mom and was like, I'm done. I'll go to rehab one more time. I'll try to get it right if you come pick me up and take me. And so she did another 30 days at San Antonio Recovery Center. And then the day I got out, I drank like 3/4 of a liter of Svedka, vodka, got alcohol poisoning. And then after I kind of recovered from the alcohol poisoning, I smoked a fat bowl of meth and then moved into another sober living house. And then at that point, I stayed sober for about.
So wait, what happened when you failed the drug test?
I didn't have to take it because I was in treatment.
Okay.
So that was like my way out. It's like,
Okay.
I got to go take a drug test next week. Well, if I'm in rehab, then they can't test me.
Right.
So, and then we gave the successful completion letter to my probation officer, and that set me off like another month before I had to UA again. And so then in another sober living house now, and I actually stayed sober, but I was still selling. And so I got involved with some people who would make acid, make LSD, and I turned a very small amount of money into a very large amount of money in a very short amount of time. And I think I was able to do that because I was sober and I was using my mind and strategy and all these things to come up. And then May 27th of 2017, my best friend was murdered over an ounce of weed. And that was also another life-changing event. It crushed my world for about a week. And then with that experience, I kind of used that as an excuse to keep doing what I was doing, selling-wise. Kind of had the thought in my head of like, well, I'm going to do this all for him, I'm gonna become this kingpin so that I can glorify my friend. And that, was a horrible decision, but that's what I did. And a couple of weeks later, I met a girl who was probably not a good fit for me. Within 2 weeks, I moved in with her. She let me sell drugs out of her apartment, so I was able to do all that. Had her quit her job and kicked her 2 roommates out, and just started to, live this kingpin lifestyle, right? And August 25th of 2017, I was out selling drugs to somebody, or I was supposed to be selling drugs to somebody, and I realized that it was a setup. And so this guy was like, hey, I'll be there in 10 minutes. 15 minutes goes by. I texted him. He's like, all right, just 10 more minutes. I got to go pick up my sister or something. And so then another 15 minutes goes by, and then I look up and I see a grill guard from one of the cops around this corner, around a building, and realized like, okay, this is, something's not right here. So I took off and went around the block. There was 6 stop signs in this parking lot. So I stopped at the first one, I ran the middle 4, and then I stopped at the last one. And then by the time I got to that last stop sign, all the cops had reached up to me. I think there was 4 marked squad cars and then a handful of unmarked vehicles. Pounced on me, immediately ripped me out of the car, put me in handcuffs, threw me in the back. They found everything, weapons, LSD, all sorts of stuff. And I was on probation at the time. And so I basically told the cops, like, hey, if y'all let my friend go, then, I'll tell you everything and I'll go to jail and y'all can take me. And so they took him to a gas station, and then 2 detectives showed up and they wanted to talk to me and trying to ask where I got it from and all that kind of stuff. And so basically what happened is they tried to get me to, to snitch on everybody and, work for them. And so I basically agreed to do that, but never had any intention of actually giving them good information. And so I gave them 3 fake names and 3 fake phone numbers and told them that if they let me go, then I'll help them get 3 arrests. And so they did. And then I was supposed to talk to them every single day until I got those arrests. And then they said I had 3 months to do it. And so I said, all right, well, then that's 3 more months to sell drugs. I'll go make a bunch of money. And then when they arrest me finally, then I'll just bond myself out and, fight the charges in court. But then 2 months later, so before that 3 months was up, they came. I guess they realized I wasn't giving them good information. And so they came and raided my apartment, arrested me and that girl I was living with. And they got me for everything. I had a lot of stuff on me. And so
How much stuff? What'd you have?
I had like over 3,000 tabs of LSD, like 7 ounces of Molly, MDMA, quarter pound of weed, guns, cash, 3 phones. I mean, everything. I had beakers and different things to make the acid, and yeah, a lot.
So they got you.
They got me good. Yep. The San Antonio Narcotics Task Force for SAPD. Rope Squad is what we called them.
You were home?
I was at the apartment complex.
And what was that like? They just knocked down the door or what?
Yeah, so technically I was already outside of the apartment when they pulled in, and so they arrested me outside of the apartment, and then they came up, and then when they were banging on the door, that girl went to the front door and then like locked the door behind her and then came out. And so she basically locked the cops out to try to protect us, and then that was when they had to kick the door down. So we weren't actually in the apartment when they kicked the door in.
All right.
Yep.
So they arrested her. You guys are in the car. They kicked the door down and find everything.
Got everything. Yep.
Okay.
And then, I did like a night in jail. My parents bonded me out. It was a $160,000 bond. They bonded her out as well. And then a couple of weeks later, got evicted from that apartment. And then I'm back now at my parents' house. She's at her parents' house.
Your parents let you come home?
They did. Yeah, because I'd gotten caught with LSD 3 times now, and Texas law says that if you get caught with LSD 3 times, it's a minimum sentence of 15 years, maximum's 99. So they knew I was going to be doing some time, and they just wanted me to try to get on track to minimize how much time I did.
Mm-hmm.
So potentially facing life in prison, and then I had a baby on the way. So
She was pregnant?
She was pregnant.
Okay.
And I think financially it was, a good decision to move back in with them and save up money for the baby, but it just enabled me to keep doing what I was doing. I got really addicted to cocaine.
So wait, you got caught with all those drugs. You bond out and you keep selling drugs?
A little bit. I wasn't selling at the capacity that I was. The organized crime groups that I was working with basically told me that they could get me a lawyer and get me out of everything, but if I went that route, then I'd be in for life, and that there was no way out.
Mm-hmm.
Or I could walk away, and since it was my friend's dad, he just had the empathy for me, like, you go do your time and don't say anything, then you're good. And so that's what I ended up doing. So I wasn't selling for him anymore, so it wasn't large amounts, but just enough to keep my habit going.
Got it.
And I was probably doing about 5 to 7 grams of cocaine every day. I would wake up with nosebleeds every morning. I couldn't breathe out of my right nostril for a couple of years after that. Just a lot. Ended up having to have surgery on my nose as well a few years later to fix everything. So, crashed a bunch of cars that year. So it was from the day I got arrested to the final court date. It was a 1 year and 2 days. And in that 1 year and 2 days, wrecked a bunch of cars, lost a bunch of jobs, was robbing a lot of people to try to feed my habit. And then about 3 weeks before the final court date, I was in my room, trying to go to sleep, watching TV. It was raining outside, so super dark in my room. And all of a sudden, this white light filled my room, and I felt this warm, tingling sensation start pushing down on my chest, and I realized that it was something supernatural. And I started saying to myself, like in my head, God, you are real. And I heard an audible voice. I don't know if it's the audible voice of God or just my thoughts, but just this loud voice say, yes, I am. And that was when I started saying the Lord's Prayer over and over again, repeating myself, Our Father, who art in heaven. And then while I'm praying, I go through this like wormhole in my head, go into an out-of-body experience, and I see a third-person perspective of myself on my knees in a lake of fire burning in what I think is hell. And so that experience, vision, whatever you want to call it, felt like it lasted for years and years. But then at the very end of what I remember, I lifted my head up, I opened my eyes, and I screamed that Jesus is Lord, and then I woke up. And then ran around my house butt naked, screaming that God is real and I'm going to heaven. And my family was all freaking out and like, what are you on? And I'm like, I'm not on anything. And it was just this whole crazy experience, and decided to go to church that Sunday, did the altar call, gave my life to God, and then about 2 weeks after that is when I finally was supposed to go to court the last time. And I thought I was going to get reset. And so my plan was, now I'm a Christian.
What do you mean reset?
Like reset the court date, right? It would have got pushed out one more month.
Okay.
And God had other plans. I had it set up to where after court I was going to go to treatment one more time, and this time do it for real. But then instead of doing that, when I went to court, my lawyer found, he got the discovery report back, all the body cams, the dash cams, and all that stuff from all the arrests, and found that the arrest in August, 2 months before they raided me, with all those stop signs. So because I never sold drugs to the cop, they had no probable cause to pull me over. That's what they were betting on. It was a sting operation. And so their probable cause for pulling me over was that I'd ran that first stop sign. But if you remember, I told you that was one of the only ones I actually stopped at. And so that whole case got blown out of the water. Now I'm only facing 5 to 99. But then like an hour later, he found that when they kicked the door in, I guess they were getting to the apartment complex, getting ready to raid me, but they were waiting on the warrant. But since I was outside and they got me there, and like they arrested me without the warrant, and then they kicked the door in without a warrant too. So they found that when they actually breached the door, it was 37 minutes before the judge signed the warrant into effect.
Oh.
And so all of that got dismissed as well. But I was on probation from that first arrest. And so couldn't get me away for all the hard stuff, so they ended up revoking my probation violation, and that's what I went to prison for. So instead of going to treatment that day, they locked me up on a 3-year sentence for a probation violation.
All right, so you go to prison for 3 years. That day.
That day.
Wasn't planning on going. We were planning on going to rehab.
Yeah, well, it was 5 days later. That was a Monday, and the judge gave me until Friday to turn myself in. So I got high for one last week, and then Friday I turned myself in.
So you got saved, but then you got high for one more time, right?
Yep.
All right.
Yep. So, and then, that was November 9th of 2018. Went into the county jail for a month and then got transferred into the state penitentiary. I did 16 months total of being
How old
locked
were you?
up. I was 19.
So 19 years old, you're in county jail. You know you're going to spend 3 years in there. What's that like your first night?
Uncomfortable, terrifying. I was kind of detoxing. It was just coke for the most part, so it wasn't like a full being dope sick, but couldn't sleep, super anxious, itchy all over, and then that on top of the mental factor of just being scared, being in real jail for the first time. But I mean, yeah, after a couple of days, after all the drugs got out of my system, I slept for 18 hours a day for about 2 weeks. Had a series of a couple of more visions in between that, spiritual visions, whatever you want to call them. And I just, decided that I'm going to take it seriously this time. I'd seen enough in my life and then in those out-of-body experiences that I just knew I had to do something different because I knew that God was real. And so I had to put my pride and my ego and my desires aside and, pick up the Bible and start reading and working out. And, I went into jail at almost 300 pounds and, started working out every day. And by the time I got out, I was only like 210. So I lost a lot of weight. I had super long hair, shaved my head, total 360 change. Even my mom didn't recognize me when she came to visit me about 8 months into it. So spiritually.
So tell me what
mentally,
that's like. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. But tell me what that's like. You go from county jail, you're 19 years old, to Texas prison, which is no joke.
Yeah.
Where'd you go to prison in Texas?
So started off at the Garza West unit in Beeville, and then
So your first night there, what's that like?
the first night in prison was, I don't really remember a lot of it. I was, so when they pick you up from the county jail and take you to the penitentiary, they pick you up at like 3 a.m. on a bus. And then they have to like go around the state to a bunch of other county jails, picking people up to go to the prison. And so I didn't sleep that night. I was so terrified. So I'd been up, I think, for a total of like 36 hours before I actually got to the prison. So I was just tired. Passed out at like 7 p.m. that night, the first night. And then woke up the next morning and it kind of set in that like this is going to be my life for the next couple of years.
Who do you talk? Who's the first person you talk to? Like, what's that like?
I mean, yeah, prison is pretty racial. It's pretty segregated. So all the other white guys, it was kind of what I looked out for, is trying to find people of my same color to, stay protected. Texas prison is, the white guys are the minority. So, just trying to be safe, and, had a lot of old school guys teaching me some different rules and stuff to survive prison. And so I was kind of holding on to those. Don't gamble, don't steal, don't join a gang, and kind of just stay in your lane. So that's what I tried to stick to. And then I kind of realized that all these guys in there are, just as mature as I am. Like, a lot of them are very immature. They've been institutionalized to some degree. And, we were all kind of on the same level despite me being so young. And so I kind of learned that life in and of itself, like I was an adult now, and there wasn't a whole lot of difference. And so I just fit in where I could, got in where I fit in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then what was that 3 years like in prison? Tell me about that.
So I only ended up doing 16 months. I made my first parole about 4 months into it. I was eligible for parole, went before the parole board. They granted it, but they said I had to do a 6-month drug treatment program. And so, but that program didn't start for another 6 months. And so I ended up having to wait 6 months. And then I went to the program, got transferred to a different unit in Beaumont, Texas. And on that unit, there was a lot of people who were getting out. And so there was people who were in there for, 25 years, 30 years, and getting to see them, get out. Like, these guys had been locked up longer than I had been alive.
Mm-hmm.
So that was very eye-opening, very impactful. So did the 6-month treatment program that turned into 7 months. And then I got out finally 2020, February 18th of 2020.
Okay.
So got out. Luckily, my parents were, they have their own businesses, so I was able to work for them.
So while you were in prison, you worked out, read your Bible?
That was it.
That's about it.
That's about it. Read books, read the Bible, worked out, and just talked with people. Played cards or dominoes, but that was about it.
Yeah. All right. So you get out, and your parents put you to work?
But yeah, I mean, so I got out like 3 weeks before COVID hit. So I went from being locked up to being locked down, and a lot of businesses shut down. So I was looking for a job for about a month and couldn't find anything. Nobody would hire me, and so my parents were like, "All right, well, you're just gonna come work for us then."
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for another few months, and then finally, like, I think 4 months after being out, I found a overnight job at a 7-Eleven making minimum wage. So that was, all I could get. So I settled for it. And
so a lot of those dudes that get out, 25 years, 15 years, formerly incarcerated people, what do those guys do? Like, what's that like, trying to come up and get out and get a job?
I don't know, man. I was blessed to be able to have, my parents to plug me in. But if I didn't have that, I think it would be I see why people go back. I see why people go back to selling drugs, because that's the only way they can make money, pay the bills, take care of their family, whatever they got to do. I mean, it's, even me, somebody who's, at that time I didn't have any tattoos. I looked sharp, I looked fit, came from a good family, articulate, well-spoken, and I couldn't get a job. And so, some of these dudes coming out with a face full of tattoos and a much more extensive criminal record, I mean, yeah, I get why they go back to drugs.
It's a broken system.
It's a broken system for sure.
Yeah.
They set you up for failure.
Yeah. So you get out, go to work for your parents. Are you going to church every Sunday? I mean, what do you do for your recovery? Like,
Yep, church every Sunday. I tried AA. I tried all these different 12-step programs, and they were good. They worked. They helped. But it wasn't for me. I was new in my faith. I am a professing Christian. Jesus is my higher power. And in the rooms, that's not always, liked. It's frowned upon in a lot of the communities where I'm at. I was kicked out of a 12-step meeting for talking about my higher power, naming Jesus. And so, that harmed me. That was traumatizing almost. I didn't want to go back after that. And so my sponsor was like, "Man, come on, you just got to hit more meetings and do this." And I was like, well, I got to go to church, so I'm not going to make the meeting. And he was like, man, this comes before church. And that just kind of went against my beliefs. And so I ended up turning my back on the 12 steps for a while. It was just church and discipleship groups, Bible studies, still a program of sorts, but just not the 12-step program. Mm-hmm. And then about a year after getting out, I found Celebrate Recovery, which is a Christ-centered 12-step program. And that was when I finally worked the 12 steps.
Awesome.
And it was profound. The fourth step of going back, fourth, fifth, and sixth steps, just going through all the traumas and making amends and, confessing everything was very relieving.
Yeah.
I finally got to get everything off of my chest and, coming clean about all the lies that I had told throughout middle school and high school and being able to just be me. I finally felt like I was enough. So
not have to put on that act anymore.
Right.
Yeah. So did you, when did you finally, so you and I get to work together in the treatment world. So when did you start being interested in that, and what was your first job like in a treatment center?
So when I was still locked up, I had one of my friends send me a letter that said, a lot of stuff, but the main thing that stuck out to me was that the number one thing he missed most about me was my ability to give advice. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of hit me, and I realized that was my purpose in life, that I'm good at giving advice, I enjoy giving advice, and apparently I'm pretty good at it. And so that kind of set me on that trajectory of going to school. I got an associate's degree in psychology, got a recovery coach certification and a life coach certification right after I got out of prison. So in that time that I wasn't working, I just did school. Parents paid for it. And then I think doing my internship for the recovery coach certification, I did a volunteer job at an outpatient place. And, it was different. Being on the other side, helping people instead of being the one getting help was really cool. I finally felt like I wasn't a burden. I finally felt like I, had a purpose in life and could make a difference in the world.
Awesome. And then did you get a job? Where'd you get your first job?
Yeah, right. It's called Rise Recovery. It's a nonprofit outpatient peer support group. They've got meetings and education classes for probation. They've got recovery coaches that are free to the public. They even have a sober high school for kids who are still in high school.
Nice.
So did the volunteer work there, did the internship, got the hours, and then got a job at a residential treatment center in Canyon Lake, Texas, called Windmill Wellness Ranch. And then
what'd you do there?
Just a tech, like a behavioral health technician. They called it a wellness advocate. And that was the first, the outpatient program was heavy 12 steps, but this program was a big clinical approach. And so I got to experience TMS and EMDR and all these different cutting edge approaches, and that, was super fascinating to me to see kind of the science behind treating people for mental health and addiction. Yeah. That didn't work out very well. So then I jumped over to a place called Laurel Ridge Treatment Center. They did the same sort of thing, ECT and a lot of stuff, more mental health focused. So I spent about 2 years there. And then at the end of the 2 years at Laurel Ridge, I felt like God was telling me to quit my job, and I didn't have anything lined up. It was just this weird feeling of quit my job, what am I going to do? Mm-hmm. And so, I trusted the Lord on that and decided that I was going to quit. And so I put in my 2-week notice, and about 3 or 4 days later, I had a guy from my church approach me and asked me to meet with him and this business partner of his to talk about a sober living house. And so I was like, yeah, let's do it. And, I kind of took that as, well, God is closing one door so that he could open this door. And that step of obedience kind of, is what blessed me. And so met with them, and they, quickly realized that they didn't really know what they were doing, and that they needed help. They didn't know the industry. They didn't work in the industry. One of them is not in recovery. And so they had the heart behind it. They had the desire and the finances, but they needed an expert in the field. And so that's kind of what I acted as in the beginning. And so opened up our first sober house a couple of months later. And then, part of sober living is finding clients. And so I had to get out there and start marketing and doing business development. And so I, was out in the community doing all the events and whatnot. And within 2 months of me representing the sober living house, I had like 6 job offers of people like, hey, you need to come work for us and do marketing for us. And so, found a detox residential center called Alamo Behavioral Health that was willing to take a chance on me, is making more money than I'd ever seen in my life. And so I was like, yeah, let's do it. Like, so really starting to see the blessings of working in treatment and, helping other people. And, that didn't work out either. A few months later, unfortunately, they had to shut down the facility. And so I started putting out job applications, and that's where y'all found me. And y'all hit me up on LinkedIn and offered me a job.
Treat Mental Health Texas.
Treat Mental Health.
So let's talk about that. Like you're doing business development, and what that means is you help find clients that need help,
right,
and are appropriate for our level of care. Like, how is that? I mean, what's that like for you?
It's fun. I enjoy it. It's tough at times, especially with the guys or the girls who don't want treatment, but they need treatment. But getting to see people come into our program and then at the end of it tell us like, man, this changed my life. I would be dead if it wasn't for this program. Like, that makes it all worth it, man. Seeing people drop like flies, overdosing, killing themselves, whatever it is, that's always hard. But then whenever you go through that and you see the people whose lives truly change, it makes all the hard stuff worth it.
Yeah.
It makes it a good thing.
Yeah. Describe so Treat Mental Health is a virtual IOP.
Right.
It's all done through telehealth. Right. We've realized, especially with COVID, that telehealth is a real viable option to get therapy and get help. Right. Explain what that's like for someone that doesn't know, that maybe needs help, and who's appropriate for that level of care.
Yeah, so I think the large majority of people would agree that getting help is good, and a lot of people will say, all right, well then go get some therapy and just see a therapist once a week, and that works for some people, but a lot of people need more, and so if that's not cutting it, then a step up to an IOP is the first thing to look at. If they're super acute, then they got to go to residential. But if they're not needing to go to a hospital, but they still need a little bit more than therapy, then IOP is that thing in the middle that bridges the gap.
Got it. Okay. So what is Garrett's life like today?
I'm blessed. I have a wife with my 6-year-old and a 6-year-old son.
And your 6-year-old son is from the mom who you were...
From a different woman, yeah.
Running and gunning
the girlfriend
with.
I was running and gunning with, yep.
Okay.
And then, so new wife. So that was the other thing. So that week that I put my 2 weeks in at the job, a couple of days after those guys approached me for the sober living, I met my wife.
Oh, wow.
And so then, about a year later, we got married. I got married back in April of this year. Got a townhome in San Antonio, so we've got our own place to live finally. 2 cars, and I think the biggest thing is that we have peace and joy. I no longer have to take psych meds anymore. I no longer have to take antidepressants or anxiolytics. I'm completely med-free, and that wasn't easy. That took several years to get to, but I don't struggle with depression anymore. I don't struggle with
And
anxiety.
at the beginning, were those medications needed?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So you're not talking that wasn't a good thing that you took those at first, but...
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but they were necessary.
Right.
I didn't want to take medicine, but I knew that it's probably what I needed. It was the only thing that could stabilize my brain, and so I did it for a few years. But then I slowly, through therapy and community support, I was able to get off of the meds eventually.
Got it. Okay. All right. Last question. I ask everybody this: what's your message to that person that's out there struggling with their mental health, their addiction, maybe lost, doesn't know where to go and where to turn and what to do? What's your message to them? What do they do?
I think the first thing is to admit that you need help to yourself, be honest with yourself, and then after that is to find help, ask for help. You've got to do something about it. You can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. You have to seek help, and then you have to do it. And it's uncomfortable, and it takes a lot of self-discipline, and, it's not fun all the time, but it's what's necessary.
Good. Well, Garrett, I appreciate you coming on. This was a fun podcast. We've been talking about doing this for about the last six months, and I'm glad you're in town and we got to do it. And you're going back home tomorrow to my home state of Texas, and we'll make big things happen. Thank you, bud.
Yes, sir. Thank
All right.
you.